Thanks for joining us, the Wealthy Retailer Podcast with your host, Dan Holman. Every episode, Dan dives into the retail headlines that matter to you, the independent retailer, covering topics ranging from retailer inventory, technology, marketing, retailers' questions, and more. The Wealthy Retailer Podcast is brought to you by Canadian Retail Solutions. Learn more at retailbycrs.com. And now, here's Dan Holman.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Wealthy Retailer Podcast. Here we are recording for the week of September 2nd. A couple of decent headlines this week, Rob.
Yeah.
Looking forward to chatting about it and prepping for the long weekend. It's going to be a busy one, I'm sure.
Say September 2nd, I say to everyone, happy conversation with everyone of saying, is it September already?
Yeah.
No.
Already?
Yeah, just blew by. But hope you're enjoying what little bit's left of the summer, as Dan said before the long weekend here. Some great headlines this week. Story about a Canadian, the sale of the 81 Toys R Us stores, as well as a little bit of talk of expansion beyond that. So that'll be interesting. Zero in on what retail executives are saying about the widespread bottleneck that's happening in supply chains, and looking forward to your thoughts on there, Dan. And Amazon, the big giant, is actually thinking brick and mortar and a little small as they expand in the kind of the boutique department stores, if you will. And this is great. 10 factors to consider before finalizing your retail store design. So I'm sure there's going to be a nugget or two in there that someone's going to be able to take away. Heck, probably even if you've been in business for 10 years, there's probably something that might give you a good fresh take on that. Okay, sir. First story coming from our good old friends from the CBC at the cbc.ca. Story about the Toys R Us stores being sold. What would you like here, Dan?
So, this is a good Ontario kid. He'd probably make the top 40 under 40 in all of Canada. For you that don't know the top 40 under 40, it's kind of an Alberta thing that started here with one of our rags where they identify the top 40 executives under 40 years of age. And I think it started in Edmonton and Calgary, and it's exploded from there. But this guy would definitely make the list. But his name is David Putnam, but it makes me think of the movie with Kevin Costner, I Want David Goddamn Putney, just because I get him confused. I don't know if you know which movie I'm talking about.
Draft Day?
Draft Day, yeah, exactly.
Yes,
Draft Day. I want David Goddamn Putney, and I want this guy in my corner too. And so, it isn't so much that this is a really relevant story to the indie retailer, but it is a story of how companies can rise from the ashes. And this is not an old boy. This is not an old boys school here. This is not retail days of old. This is a guy that took Sunrise Records and HMV from the very ashes. He restarted David's Tea, and he's doing everything with a fresh new mindset that, for me, is all about where we need to go as an indie retailer.
Yeah.
Yes, he's going to take the lion's share of these 81 stores in Canada. I think it's Macy's that perhaps got the rest from Fairfax. Fairfax is the company that comes in, swoops in, and buys assets, retail assets often from bankruptcy or from receivership. And David Putnam has agreed to take on the operation of the 81 stores and maybe add 10 to 15 in the mix. And he's saying, in no uncertain terms, brick and mortar can't exist without e-com, and e-com can't exist without brick and mortar, which might lead into one of our other stories about the big, I almost said asshole, but I meant Amazon.
Too.
But so, what does this mean? This, if you're in the world where you love Mastermind or you love Leisure World, these toy stores, this is what you're going to get is this, remember back to perhaps not when you and I were kids, Rob, but when you're older kids, when my kids were kids, Toys R Us was a big deal. It was a place to go. It was experiential. And David is going to take us down that road with Toys R Us. So really good story, and understanding that the toy market has grown by 20 or more percent because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
It had been a really softening market, probably poorly run market. Obviously, they went bankrupt. And I think what you're going to find from this guy that, just Wikipedia, this dude, he owns the lion's share of music retail today. I mean, between Sunrise Records and HMV, he is the king of music in a world where you don't buy a ton of music anymore, right? There is a bit of a resurgent, but he's figuring this out, which means good things for Toys R Us and that old school store that, my kids loved.
Do you think he, having HMV and the David's Tea, now Toys R Us, do you foresee any plans where he's puppet master? This is how I'm going to work them together, or you think they're all going to stay rather independent that way?
No, I think there is going to be a level of independence here, but I think as this guy's 36 or 37 years old, he's on the leading edge of retail, and he's taking them to a new place. I don't believe that his intention is to build one massive retail conglomerate. It's to build several silos of retail and apply what he's learned over the last couple of years with these other two acquisitions, to really move the needle forward. There's a big difference between a 40,000 square foot Toys R Us store and an 1,800 square foot HMV store, and now what David's Tea is. And it's not called David's Tea, and forgive me, David, I don't remember the name of the new David's Tea stores. But those are very boutique, 500-600 square foot stores in crazy centers across the country. So he's in every different, there's not one common theme other than I'm going to be on the leading edge. I'm going to let some AI do my thinking for me. I'm going to put them in good places. I'm going to make sure that they're well capitalized, and we'll grow them from there. So good on him.
Probably a significant, we've talked about this a few times in the past, the data understanding of like what comes with each chain and being able to leverage that to the best opportunity within all these businesses. For
sure. There's no question. No question.
Right on. Okay, Dan, next story comes from retaildive.com. These supply chain bottlenecks, few retail execs weigh in. I'm sure you've got your opinion. You're about to lay it on us. What do you got, man?
I mean, what a great opportunity for every retail executive to puff their chest and say, hey, we got ourselves covered. We got this. Yeah, there's a bit of a bottleneck chain, but our inventories are up and our margins are up, and puff your chest, puff your chest, puff your chest. It's all bullshit. They haven't got anything figured out. Walk through any one of these. Kohl's, Target, I'm going to mess up here. Lowe's is in trouble with inventory. TJX stores are in trouble with inventory. And all these guys puffing their chest and saying, we got this, we got this, we got this. They don't have it. Home Depot, part of this group that sees 300 container vessels, thousands and thousands of containers floating around in the Pacific Ocean. Man, they don't have it figured out. And what they are figuring out is how to become a little bit more diversified. And so while we'll have a link to this, and there are some other, perhaps what I would think are more relevant to us, maybe even, like the Children's Place, a little bit more. Rob Helm from the Children's Place, he's their CFO. For me, a little more respected. Jonathan Sinclair from Canada Goose, he's probably, opposite of what, the Asian-based stores are. He's shipping product out and finding his way through the murky water of exporting with Canada Goose. But all these other guys that are Asian-based are challenged. And so what I want the independent retailer to hear is, if you haven't figured this out yet, if you've still, up to your neck in your rear end, you gotta diversify, and you have to stop making excuse that no one has anything. I can walk through 10 stores in my city that are ripe with brand new inventory, but they're coming from different sources than they've traditionally come from. And while these TJXs of the world and Lowe's and Targets of the world are saying, we got our shit figured out, good for them. The ability for the independent retailer to not just survive, but thrive is through diversification, not becoming a victim of circumstance. Don't lean on, if you're in Canada, don't lean on your distributor and what they're saying to move the needle. You've got to get outside your box, which today, like it or not, means you got to do a little bit more traveling. You've got to go to trade shows that perhaps you haven't been to. You've got to be more focused on what is available immediately and push back on the distributors that are saying, spring 22 orders were due 3 weeks ago. Get the order in today. If you don't get inventory in your store right now from a diversified supply chain, You won't be here in spring 22. Maybe a bit more harsh than I want it to be, Rob.
Right.
But
right.
the reality is you got to figure this out. You got to don't be misled by bullshit headlines that tell you there's a supply shortage. Don't be misled that there's disruption. Figure this out. This is what we as entrepreneurs, as indie retailers do best. We figure shit out, and we are not misled by the masses. And while I love Retail Dive, this for me was, chest puffing for the big guys. And the indie retailer just needs to know, put your head out of your ass. Let's go find some product.
This podcast is brought to you by Canadian Retail Solutions. We've been empowering retailers across North America for 30 years with the latest in point-of-sale technology, best-in-class support, merchandise intelligence with open-to-buy planning, and much more. CRS has the retail solution to help take your retail business to the next level of success. Visit retailbycrs.com to learn more. Remember, Canadian Retail Solutions exists to help make you, the independent retailer, better.
Okay. Speaking of big guys, puffing chests, usually they puff them out really big to go real big. But in this case, they're kind of going small in that mid-sized department boutique store, if you will. Amazon's got some plans on the horizon.
Yeah, I think they're starting in California, right? They're going to open some boutique stores starting in California. I think they might have 10 on the roadmap. And so why did I choose this article, to let's talk about? I'm not a big Bezos fan. I'm not a big Amazon fan. My family knows.
We make fun of his rocket right now.
We make fun of his rocket. But this is what we need to know about these guys. I said this to someone else not very long ago. Amazon is short-lived. And if you don't believe that, watch what's going on around them. Amazon in their pre-2020 existence is very short-lived. There are more and more and more marketplaces coming on. The reason Amazon grew and owned the market is because they didn't have competition. Well, now every Tom, Dick, and Harry's trying to create a marketplace to be able to compete with Amazon. And they're saying, in order for us to get more market share, we've got to open footprint stores, boutique type stores, 10,000. This is coming on the back of them building a 5-story building right now, distribution out here, in Atchison, Alberta. They're building another 5. I mean, the biggest building I've ever seen, they're putting it up. And like many before them that have owned their market, they're ripe for collapse. And part of the way that they're going to save themselves is the recognition that, hey, hang on a second, the indie retailers, they got their shit figured out. I need to open a smaller footprint store. Now, listen, a 30,000 square foot building or store isn't a small footprint, but in the Amazon world, it is a boutique for them. Right. And they're going to open small scale stores where they can push their own product. It won't be a marketplace. It's not a reseller store. It's an Amazon store. Yeah. And they're going to be able to control certainly distribution and margin and gain some market share. Yep. Doug Stevens, the retail prophet, said a long time ago, brick and mortar stores are becoming a marketing medium, right? It's how I gain market share through the brick and mortar. Well, that's where Amazon is going. And if they don't pivot, if they don't make this shift now, 2 years from now, we'll be talking about a company that once was great that flew around in penis-shaped rockets. But that'll be what it is, man.
Do you think, Dan, that I think it wasn't long ago we talked about Netflix opening brick and mortar. Do you think this is a bit of an entertainment play for them with, Amazon owns Twitch, they own Amazon Prime and just creating those experiential touch points that way? Like you said, it's going to be mostly their stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be their stuff. But I think they recognize that the way to gather market is to get out physically in front of people. As David Putnam talks about, e-com doesn't exist without brick and mortar. And every e-com only business probably has some aching desire to open a little storefront. Right. Here, put my hand up. We've got an e-com business with a storefront now because we know that we're still a tactile world. I still want to touch and feel it. And maybe I'm not as comfortable today with the in and out of the product on my front door, put it back, they'll pick it up. Maybe I do want to walk in and have some human interaction. And I think that that's part of their idea to, to be better competition is to start to mimic where there is success. And that's in the indie world. We deliver a better service than anyone does.
Good stuff. Well, this next story coming from smallbiztrends.com. Hey, maybe even Amazon checked out this list too. 10 factors to consider before setting up the design of your store, and some really great points in here. What stood out at you?
Yeah, there were some really good points. And I think that, I'm going to say this, small business trends sort of hit a bit of a nail on the head here when they start to talk about store design. For me, the number one thing about store design was the exterior, not the interior. We're talking about what does your store need to look like? And the most attractive thing about a store, I won't use that term that we used to use that was sign advertising, Rob, that people just happen by your store. Yep. But the way to get people into your store is to build this gorgeous storefront that when they're driving by, they shoot in. Right.
And you got half of that old word back in there. So well done.
Yeah. It is the drive-by. But it became that this outside of your storefront is really the most important part of attracting a new customer. And assuming people are window shopping, they're out to buy, and you have to make sure that your store is inviting from the outside. Yeah. Right. Before you worry about furnishing the inside, start outside. We spend far too little money on the exterior of our presentation. We're very lopsided. The teeter-totter is top to bottom with interior furnishings and finishes, but we don't spend a lot of money. And if you're looking to attract drive-by shooting traffic, then you've got to make it a gorgeous building. And we miss that. The other thing that I liked about this top 10 list was they found a way to sneak Instagrammability in here. That's a word, Rob. Instagrammability, right? Retail stores are back in the game. They have to be smarter in designing them, making it a bit of an experience, and adding perhaps some comfortable chairs and making the store Instagrammable, a place where I might want to take a selfie. And that we have some pretty iconic Instagram-worthy walls and interiors. Here in town, we've got a great let's start making a life, not a living Instagram wall at one of our favorite retailers. Nashville's Wings, famous, throughout the world. You want to go get your picture taken on that wall. Yeah. And I think that Instagrammability or the social interaction that you can create in your store is one of the top 10 things to focus on. The last thing I'm going to say, there's 10 of this. They'll be in the newsletter this week. But the last one I want to talk about was really understanding your level of occupancy and the display. Occupancy, how many people can be in your store? And is my store as comfortable at 10% over capacity or 110% capacity as it is at 50 and as it is at 10%? Making sure that, we've got the wingspan between product. If I can't do a 360 pirouette in your store without banging into racks and fixtures and crushed up clothing, you're over positioning your store. You're not making it comfortable. Creating a comfortable experience in your store starts with some space. Yeah. It also starts with a few hiding spots. Customers have to have the ability to decompress as they walk in the door. They've got to, they walk in your door, and that decompression moment happens with the sight, the sound, and the smell. Yep. And there has to be a way for them to escape just slightly, take a deep breath before we jump on them. And so building that into your store as you're building it out is critically important. Critically, I say that too much. It's important. Yeah, totally. Give people a chance to decompress, and building displays around decompression zones makes good sense. It speeds up that process where customer moves from shopper to buyer. And that's what we want. Everybody walks in your door just looking, right? Yeah. They're just looking. And we have to give them a minute to recognize that they're actually looking for us and our service. And this comes with the way we space plan our stores. Too many of us spend, and listen, I was on a coaching call yesterday where the client talked about filling her store. And I'm like, whoa. Your job is not to fill your store. Your job is to fill her closet. Your job is to fill her home, right? Your job is to fill my great room, not your store. Allow me to envision what this product looks like in my life, whether it's a sofa or a jacket or a dress. Let me pause a minute. Let me see it and think about, romance this thing into my possession. Right? And that's by awesome. Us overloading stores, we lose that opportunity, man.
Yeah. It was a great point here, and not to jump too far ahead, but we got a few more stories to share. That one that stood out was accessibility. And we're sharing this story in the newsletter. Actually, it's data driven, but talking about the US, some really interesting stats. People with disabilities in the US, it's 24% of people are facing some form of disability. And you think how if you design with that in mind, how much more welcoming you can make that to all of your customers. So
it's true. I mean, accessibility, lighting, these things that are sometimes forgotten about. Add some natural light to your store. It changes the way it feels. Maybe not in, November driven Alberta, Northern Alberta, where it's dark at 3:30, but through the normal process, I want some natural light coming in. Yeah. So there were a lot of good things in here. I mean, they talked about capacity, they talked about natural light, they talked about the flow of product, the progressive display. They talked about the difference between usable space and brand experience. So it's worth the read, and they're really short little paragraphs. I probably could have covered them all off, but there were 3 that I really liked. And,
those are good.
Let's remember that everybody's got a day to live here, and listening to us windbags isn't going to make any money today.
It's a list of 10, folks. We gave you 3, and now we gave you 7 reasons to head to retailbycrs.com. Grab that newsletter, sign up if you haven't. We're going to have the links for these stories. We got a few more. As I said, there's that story with the stats about people with disabilities in the US, making sure your store is set up properly for that. Story about retail co-op members. I like this, how they stay independent by sharing tech together. And then one talking about the future of mobility and how it will reshape retail and leisure going forward. So a lot of great stories this week, Dan.
Yeah, pretty good stuff. I can't wait to get over the long weekend and dive into fall. Man, it's going to be a great season. I am so excited for our retail community. We're going to have a rockin' good fall. Can't wait to see it kick off here. Happy retailing, everyone.